How is everybody doing? And welcome back for another Strength Chat episode. Today, I have got a very special guest for you. Today, I'm joined by a coach with over 20 years experience. He's worked with NFL athletes to bodybuilders and countless general population clients. Today, I'm joined by the one and only Nick Tumminello. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. I appreciate the kind introduction and thanks for all you do to put a podcast like this together to give a platform to people like me. So it's an honor.
No worries at all. Thanks a lot for taking the time to jump on. How have you been? What's been going on in your world?
A lot has been going on, man. This coming weekend, I know a lot of people will be listening to this podcast, for hopefully for years on end, but this coming weekend is a big weekend for me because we're doing the 3-day photo shoot for my fourth training book, which should be out at the winter this year or beginning of 2022. So that's a big milestone in the book writing process, probably the last difficult milestone, I would say. So that's coming up in a few days. Just got a new condo down here in South Florida. So it's a lot going on.
Oh, nice. And I saw as well, obviously, with your moving, doing, getting, one-to-one clients in person, obviously putting out on your social media as well. How sort of, everything over there in Florida in terms of gyms opening? Because I know they've been shutting and closing, and is everything relatively back to normal in terms of getting sessions in person now?
Yes. I think the US probably works a little differently than, I'm not sure, than over in the UK and other countries. Here we have states' rights. So even though we have the federal government, states actually decide. So we have California, which is very much more locked down. Florida opened up a lot quicker. Even though we're in the same country, it's kind of like many countries in existence, which I think is what makes the US cool. So yeah, it's a lot more open here than it has been.
Yeah, nice. And then in terms of because it's always one of those, I always like to ask, especially when I speak with coaches who have released books. Obviously, the 3 previous books that you've released as well. Was that something that you always wanted to give a go, or was it a natural progression in terms of putting those books out there?
Well, I would say once I started writing more, it's kind of was like a snowball effect. I dreaded writing because I was always a verbal person and I never learned how to type. I still don't know how to formally type. So it was, to me, I was like, just put up the camera on, we'll do a YouTube, now Insta, and I can talk and rap. But to me to write, and I still to this day hate email because I think it's when it takes me to write it out, I can knock it out real quick if I do a verbal. But I realized there's a staying power. There's there's a word I can't really think of right now. It starts with a P. I'll think of it in a second. But there's a prestige is the word I look. There's a certain prestige to writing, and then books even further. So once I realized that people were picking up what I was putting down, they were digging it. Then it was the next logical step was to write. And I like working with a publisher because it adds a prestige to it. I could self-publish, but I have other ways to do videos and things like that on my own. So it's nice when you go through that process. Plus, you go through more of a, not necessarily peer review, but very, very intense editing by professional editors. So I like that. I think it brings out the best in the book.
Yeah, I wanted to sort of touch on that. It might be a little bit of a tangent, but I'm kind of, I've tried writing, blogs and articles, and I'm kind of similar. I would much rather, and that's, part of the reason why I set up the podcast, being able to speak to people and put a point across by talking, and the content and information that you put out there. I kind of wanted just to, get a little bit of a background in terms of, how did it come about? But I can understand, what you mean in terms of the prestige of, having a book there. Because obviously a book, I know videos can stay there, but, books are going to last a little bit longer, something that you've got physically in your hand, if you like.
Sure. And also we're in a social media age, and which, social media friendly things are very short. And I always tell people, I go, this is Facebook, and I'm sure there are other social media platforms, but from my little saying, it sounds cool. This is Facebook, not a textbook, right? When they're like, well, what about this? And have you thought about this? It's like, okay, I'm just writing something that's Facebook friendly just because I didn't say it doesn't mean I haven't considered it, but that's what textbooks are for. Or I don't really write textbooks, but you understand the point. There's a lot more detail, and it's nice to have a soup to nuts sort of thing. And then, of course, you have other subject matters that you can cover, right? You know, when if it's about fat loss, it's about hypertrophy training. So that's the beauty of writing a book. You really have a complete system there.
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting about the social media side of things, because I know sort of, you know, for Instagram, sometimes I know obviously you can put longer videos on there now, but at one point it was only a minute long. So you've got to try and get your point across in a minute, whereas there's other things that you would want to touch on. So I think sometimes it's just starting that conversation to be like, I didn't mention it in the video because it was only a minute long. There's a lot more that, you know, especially like what you mentioned in the book, a lot more that you can chat about. So obviously, I did a little bit of introduction. You've mentioned about the books that you've had published. For anyone listening, or any new listeners listening who might not know your background, your experience in coaching and sort of your career, if you like, just want to give a little bit of a background to yourself.
Sure, I'll try to be as brief of this as possible because people want to get things out of this, and you know, learning my history, they're not really going to learn how to be a better trainer. So, really, I'm a non-college educated guy. I'm just a lowly CPT, personal trainer, high school degree, and I was a C and B grade student. But I knew I wanted to be a trainer right out of high school, which at that time I was kind of that last generation where if you said you want to be a personal trainer, people would go, yeah, but you're going to get a real job in a few years, right? Like now there's college courses on how to be a strength coach, but graduating high school in the late 90s, it was before that. It was that last generation before that was cool. And before you knew you could make some money in it. From there, I was lucky enough to start my own gym with a business partner named Mark Spataro in Baltimore, Maryland, which is my home state. I don't currently live there, but it's where I'm born and raised. I worked at a big box gym, accumulated several big box gyms actually, accumulated a pretty big clientele base, then moved into my own place. And pretty much I was off and running from there. So I've pretty much worked for myself the majority of my career, and realized as I was going, I used to go to conferences like crazy. I mean, I would go like 5 to 7 a year. And because I was just not only determined, but I think as a personal hobby to just be the best trainer that I could be. But in all honesty, I wanted to be better than you and better than him and better than her. And I wanted to be the best in my area and one of the best in the world. I figure if you want to do something, why not try to be the best at it? And I was lucky enough early on to work with a couple NFL players. I kind of fell ass backwards into that young. And they always kind of had that mentality. They're like, no, I don't just want to make the team. I want to make the team better. And I want to be one of the best, you know, and I'll learn from my mistakes and keep going. Otherwise, why do this? So I thought that was just a good mentality to have. And they've always refined their craft. And I thought, why not apply that to training? And I would say so that brings me to here. I started writing and I wanted to test myself in other avenues. You know, oh, can I hang with peer review? Can I do that? Even though I'm not academically trained, can I do that? So one of them was I wanted to give back to the field and share my views. The other one was almost like taking on a personal challenge. It's like, can I do this? Right. So to me, those are all aspects of the training realm. And, you know, that kind of brings me to where we are now, you know, books, courses, certifications, all that sort of stuff. And it's fun to sort of have your art, even though it's a science, you know, it's coming from me. Obviously, I'm not reinventing the wheel, but I'm putting out my own brand of wheels, right? There's a lot of different wheel makers. So, and tire manufacturers, it's just my brand. So, so that's a nice, fun thing to do. If you're fairly like a creative person and you have your own ideas and you see other people out there, then you go, man, why are they talking about this? Or you constantly find yourself, I'm talking to the listeners now, find yourself sort of frustrated. You think there's some smart people out there, but you're like, I don't know about that. I don't know. I think that guy, Nick, you know, sometimes the stuff is okay, whatever. You have those strong views, do it. Start putting stuff out there yourself. And that's kind of how I was. I would look at what some of the so-called best coaches were doing, and I would go, all right, I respect what you're doing, but you know what? I think I can do it better.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of analogy. So you always say, sometimes I always think as though if I say or other people say, trying to reinvent the wheel, what you said there of it's your own brand of wheel. I think that's a good way of looking at it. So I might have to, any of my clients listening, if you hear me say that in the gym, you know, I've taken it off. Then I quite like that analogy, and that, especially with everything, because you know, from starting out to as you progress through, I think you know you develop as a coach, as a trainer, and you know I think it's good to always challenge yourself and develop yourself, not just in the terms of knowledge as being a coach and a trainer, but in other areas as well, such as like what you mentioned there about the writing side of things. I think one question that I like to ask as well, because following the content that you've put out there and the books that you've put out there, who was sort of who did you look up to in as coaches when you were starting out? Who were your sort of influences?
So it's funny, I get asked this question most interviews, and I certainly have a few people that I can speak to, but I wasn't influenced by them in the same way that you would think. And maybe we can explore that a little bit. Well, my biggest influence is my mom. And I know that might sound cliche, and you might sound like one of these people win their awards, you know, thank you, I want to thank God my mom. You know, I genuinely mean it. My mom was a bodybuilder in the 80s. We still talk about fitness. It's the way we bond. Quick little thing. My parents got divorced when I was young. There was custody back and forth. And there would be some times where I wouldn't get to see my mom because we were in different states. So the way my mom and this is as I got into my teens, but I was into weight training. So we would my mom was also into fitness and in the medical field. We would meet at fitness conferences in different states and use it as a vacation. So I was at 13 or 14 attending fitness conferences with my mother. And that's how we bonded. So I really mean it. So, and also I was learning long before I was a trainer. Anyway, I would say my biggest influences as a trainer were the people that I was first exposed to as an up and coming trainer in the later 90s, when I really knew I was already a trainer. And they are, I would say, the first one I would definitely say is Juan Carlos Santana, not the guitar player, Coach Juan Carlos Santana. I would definitely say Paul Chek. Paul Chek is the first guy that I saw. I mean, you got to keep in mind now, this is over 20 years ago now, right? So before it was all just weight, you know, barbells, dumbbells, and machines, you know, all this 3D training and assessments and looking at more details. There's certainly plenty of things I disagree with these guys on, some more than others, but they were the first influences where I went, wow, there's really more to this than just showing people how to use the machines and bodybuilding. So it was really, you know, Vern Gambetta is another name. But that's like the training stuff. And I'm sure there's a lot of that out there. Now it's just way more information. But I would say my biggest influences in regards to sort of like my attitudinal disposition and delivery really comes up from the fact that I grew up as a punk rock music fan. I know that's going to sound really silly, but that was actually a bigger influence on me. And punk rock was all about like, you don't have to be good. Just get up there and start playing and figure it out. Right. And also punk rock was about saying like all this other music that's out there right now on the radio, we don't relate to it. Right. You know what I mean? Like, so we're going to like start our own little thing and sing about things. And we're kind of pissed off, you know, we're a bunch of kind of pissed off dudes, you know what I mean? So we're going to talk about things that we're dealing with. And so it was just raw and kind of do it yourself. And they had messages and it was kind of anti-authority sort of thing. Doesn't mean you don't respect police. It just means that just because you're up here in politics means you know what you're talking about or you have my best interest in mind. And it's also just kind of like, fuck you, I'm going to do it this way. I don't give a shit. You know what I mean? And I think you can kind of see that's kind of how I roll. You know, and I also have my own voice. I thought a lot of music tends to sound the same. So that actually is more influential on keeping me going than just some people that I saw that showed me some cool exercises, you know?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's a good way. And that's how I try and, you know, develop myself as a coach. And, you know, that kind of goes nicely into the sort of first couple of questions that I had in mind, really, because you mentioned about how you developed into training and coaching, whereas now obviously there's courses, there's university courses and all these other things, and especially with social media, you can see exercises, and there's a lot more potentially influences within that specific area.
Yeah.
When it comes to whether it's coming to writing programs or delivering sessions, where do you think sometimes younger trainers potentially go wrong? And do you think there's sometimes a fear of, well, I'm going to do it this way, this is what I feel comfortable with, rather than trying to replicate, other coaches that are obviously got a big following and a big reputation, rather than trying to be, comfortable with how they are as a coach or trainer?
Well, I'm definitely going to answer your question directly with some tips, but I will say that regardless of what I say, we all have to follow our own journey and do what use the key word, what they're comfortable with. And if you're not comfortable with it, then you're not going to use it. So whether it's optimal or less optimal, I don't say wrong or right, because there's a lot of ways to, exercise people, as long as you keep them safe and they enjoy it. I mean, enjoy it enough to keep coming back, not that it's not challenging. I would say, follow your path, because you could look back at myself, and the majority of things I'm doing are pretty consistent, but there's certainly things I tweak. But if somebody came along now and said, don't do that, I wasn't in that stage. It's like being in a relationship where everybody goes, that person's not right for you, but you don't see that until after the fact. Some things you have to do yourself. So that being said, I would say is that the biggest mistake in regards to still sticking with what you're comfortable with is to try to do something to the client instead of for the client. Now, what do I mean by that? Normally, us trainers, we get into training others because we love it, and we're pretty much a gym rat, if you know what I mean. We're like really into some kind of lifting, whether it be bodybuilding, powerlifting, a mix, maybe we're an ex-athlete, and we're pretty serious about training. It's a regular part of our life, that sort of thing. But the everyday person that we're usually going to work with, in most cases, yes, there are powerlifting gyms, which are a self-selected group of people that want to be around that, right? But the majority of trainers are working in big box gyms or fitness facilities or group fitness facilities, and they're working with everyday moms and dads, Joes and Janes, who exercise is secondary to them. It's just basically adult physical education, adult PE. And they're not as serious about lifting as we are. And we misinterpret it as, they come in and they cancel days. They come in and they're not worried about their deadlift numbers or how big their back is, yada, yada, yada. They say they are, get a picture of my back when I do this. Yeah. But they're not like trying to really get bigger lats, right? So, they're not training back twice a week and measuring their volume. That's what I mean. So it sounds like they're serious, but they're really not. And that's okay. They're consistent. So they're serious about exercise, but they're not serious about one particular type of performance or physique goal. They're serious about just staying generally healthy and fit and living an independent and active lifestyle. And a lot of us trainers, we misinterpret that as, well, they don't take it serious, or they're satisfied with being mediocre. And it's like, well, no, they're satisfied with exercising, but I didn't realize that chasing bigger deadlift or trap bar numbers or bigger biceps makes you a mediocre human. It's like, you realize that person you're training is a surgeon, right? Like they're trying to be a great surgeon. Why aren't you the trainer? Why didn't you become a surgeon? They can say the same thing about you, right? That person invented a certain internet technology. These are clients that we work with. So they're elite. They're just elite in a different aspect of their life. And not everybody can be awesome at being a gym rat,
Yeah, I think with a couple of things that sort of mentioning from there is, I know for myself, competing in powerlifting, you kind of think that when everyone comes in, especially as starting out as a coach, you think, oh yeah, everyone's going to want to be doing powerlifting, whereas actually you develop along and realize, yeah, actually they want to build a little bit of muscle, lose a little bit of fat. And the one thing that you said there is, actually enjoying it. They might be really serious as a surgeon, and that's the best thing that they want to do. Whereas actually, they might be using the gym as, de-stress, enjoying it, socializing side of things. do you think that's the sort of the follow-up questions from there? When people or coaches have a background in a specific, whether it be bodybuilding or powerlifting, do you think they try and fit the clients within their system rather than trying to, branch out a little bit and have a little bit of a wider skill set?
Yes.
And then
go ahead.
Sorry. Just the second question for that as well is, when we're starting out, the one thing that you said there is about they're not taking the gym seriously. And sometimes when maybe newer trainers and coaches are delivering a session, it can be quite robotic, as we've got to do X, Y, and Z. Whereas, going back to the very first question that I asked in terms of feeling comfortable, a more experienced coach and trainer looks as though they're trying to have a laugh with a client, build a relationship, and enjoy the session rather than being, right, okay, so we need to be in this angle and we need to do this. What are kind of your thoughts on those two questions, if they all kind of make sense?
Well, you're right. So, I mean, like I said, people are going to do what they're comfortable with, and you do what you know, right? So there's nothing wrong with that, right? If you really know barbell exercises, then you're going to stick with what you know. And what you're going to find is that some people will dig it. Other people will go, I don't like the barbell. You know what I mean? My neighbor, seriously, they'll go, my neighbor got hurt doing deadlifts. I don't want to do the barbell. We're more like, oh, God, but it's like that person is telling you something. And right now they don't trust you enough to listen to you. And if you just give them oh God, that's such a stupid myth. It's like, now you just called them dumb. And, so you're already, you got to build trust, right? And it is somewhat of a compromise. I don't mean compromising your values. I don't mean you sit there and talk to them and walk around the building and let the client dictate whatever you do and just stretch them the whole time because they asked it. No. What it's saying is you can still strength train, but maybe they're more comfortable with bands right now. And when they start seeing that booty perk up a little bit, they go, oh, that's really good. Yeah, okay, you know what? Let's try a little, let's add in maybe that barbell. I got something. And then they go, okay, they're willing to try it now because they trust you, right? There's a human side. You're training humans. We tend to think of people from the neck down, scapular position, pelvic position, knees in or out. No, you're training a human being from the head up. So we have to forget, we tend to forget that results are not just in how big these get and how big your numbers get, right? For a lot of people, it's just being more consistent, being able to do things that are a little bit more challenging and for them than they would normally do, and being interested. See, that's the big thing that we forget. We forget that we love exercise, and it's important to find help other people find a love for movement and exercise. And they don't always love the same aspects of exercise that we do, which is why there are different things to do it. So there's nothing wrong with using barbell exercises with people, but when you push it to the next level, like, well, now you got to practice the skill of deadlifting, like, leaning back against the bar. That's a powerlifting technique just to counterbalance your body weight to lift the bar up, right? You don't need to know that to get stronger glutes and hamstrings, which is the only reason that person is there to deadlift. They're not there to be a powerlifter. So it's just learning that perspective of why is this person here and how can I use my current skill set to best facilitate what they want and what they need now, which may just mean they're finding themselves with exercise. We're figuring out, and all these different pieces of equipment, kettlebell, dumbbell, these are just tools for me. I don't need to be married to one thing because this person doesn't care about that. Now, if the person says, I want to get my deadlift numbers up, well, that changes things. But what do you do for the rest of the session? So like I said, you normally learn that after you've been training some people for a while and you realize some people get turned off by it. And instead of thinking that they're just not serious or they just don't care or they're satisfied with being mediocre, that's a very self-centered view that the way you look at training is the way everybody should look at training. Man, in politics, that's called a dictator. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple of things from there because, especially from, starting out with the qualification that you had, building up a big client base and seeing probably quite a lot of, I put a post out the other day about, fitness trends that people can jump on the bandwagon. And in terms of the changes throughout over, your entire career, trainers are coming in, and I think it was a good point there when you're saying we're not coaching from the neck down, we're coaching from the neck up. Do you think because there's so many courses now and you can go and get degrees in coaching, in exercise science, do you think that it's maybe swung a little bit too far, one way, in terms of coaches and trainers are so focused on the tools that they should be using, and this is the key formula that we need for fat loss, rather than working with the person who's in front of you who might have 2 kids, is working a really long job, right? Okay, actually that formula isn't going to work for that person. We just need to speak with them, find out what they enjoy, which might be whatever it might be, whatever form of exercise it may be.
Yeah, we're definitely, and I say we is just a general term. The focus with and listen, I noticed this when the whole sort of push for the evidence-based training, and I'm not saying it's new, it's always been around, but it became more trendy, right? And I was definitely on the sort of like, as social media started getting bigger and you get these clashes, between the science-based trainer versus the anecdotal-based trainer. And, that's kind of come and gone now because we realized it didn't go anywhere. But the thing that happened, the thing that we've lost is that we've lost the human side of things, right? It's about the response that you get. And if you're constantly getting the same response and it's a fairly negative, or sort of like, people are like, well, wait a minute, check your tone, man. You know what I mean? Or they're just kind of like, well, what about this? Or they seem like to not want to listen to you. Instead of blaming them and saying, well, you just don't know how to argue, you just don't know the science, you don't know this. You are the common denominator in all of that, right? So you got to change your approach. And I think with all the sort of I'm glad people are looking more at evidence and argument and things, but the more nerdy we get, the less time we're spending interacting with actual human beings. And we get a lot worse at understanding what they're going to respond to, because human beings are not like in an academic setting. It's not, they're going to do what they want. Right. And I'm definitely like that. Like, I do not like authoritativeness. Right. So that's where I always push back a little bit with some of these. I'm all about science and skepticism, but sometimes when people talk a little like, oh, well, you did this, I'll just go, hey, fuck you. You know what I mean? You don't know you know what I mean? Like, and I'll stop listening to you right off the bat. And I go, look, you got to show some respect first, because it almost just seems like you're trying to do something to me now. And I'll be happy to point out all the things that you don't know about what actually is going to happen on the gym floor, what people are really going to ask you about, what they're going to respond to, how to speak to them. And you only learn that not just when you're working with clients, but when you're actually listening to them. That's the problem, is people don't listen. They just judge, and they just think, well, everybody would be better off if they just knew how to do this. And well, guess what? They don't. So exist in this world, right? And I'll give you a great example. This has actually happened. This is from an NFL strength coach. I'm not going to tell you what team, just for privacy purposes or whatever, but this is recent. So the team hired a new dietitian. Right now, these teams have their full facilities. They have chefs. All the players during the season eat at the facility, so they know how many calories. They can control everything, and that's important because you can look at all the metrics. If somebody's not performing well or gets injured often, you can look at every possible metric and see maybe what might have caused it. So that's a good thing. You want to have as much control if you're a coach and GM as you can of your team, right? Okay. So this dietitian came in and she said, oh, you guys are serving fried foods here at the kitchen. No more fried foods. And, for obvious reasons, fried foods are not supposed to be good for you, yada, yada. We all know there's no such thing as bad foods. It's just bad diets and too much. But to her, no, we just got to get it out of here. Okay, great. So a lot of the guys who enjoyed it, which was the majority of the team, because fried foods are freaking delicious, right? And they're burning tons of calories throughout practice. They literally live at the facility. They not only did they not just eat a little bit there, they stopped eating at the facility totally and started going across the street to get what they wanted, because these are grown men. These are not college kids, right, that are on stipends. These are multimillionaires, and go, all right, well, fine. You don't want to give us what we want. We'll go over here. We don't have to. Right? So now they lost complete monitoring of everything. So her solution, it was a female dietitian, her solution to one problem caused a problem that was 1,000 times bigger.
Yeah.
Now, you only learn this when you work with people. So guess what happened? Got to put the fried foods back in. So when I say compromise, that is what I mean. She's used to an academic setting. Oh, we just take this out and everybody's just going to follow what we want. This isn't academia anymore. This isn't control. These are humans. They're going to do whatever the hell they want.
Yeah, definitely. The analogy, like I said before, I'm a big fan of analogy, and I think sometimes, it's a little bit. I always say, if I was to say, don't press the big red button, don't do it, don't look at it, don't press it. There's probably deep down inside of everyone. I know I would. If someone said, don't press that, you'd be wanting to go, but what would happen what happened if I did press it? What would go from there? There's that thing of, I think everyone's, clients, coaches, has that little bit inside them to push back a little bit. And that example there, right? Get rid of all the fried food, right? Well, actually, I can just go get it somewhere else. So there's always going to be an opposite reaction to something. One thing that you did mention when you were talking about, building trust and working with, working with humans, and because ultimately, especially working with people, you've got to be able to build relationships. That often starts from the consultation as a coach or trainer, but also the assessment as well. Now, when we're talking about the clinical side of things, there's loads of assessments and battery of tests that can be used. I know at one point, we were using the FMS test when we have members coming into the gym. How important is that sort of first assessment, that first consultation, especially as a coach who's new to it, because it's striking that balance between like what you were mentioning there, right? Well, this is the science behind everything. This is what it is. Whereas actually, sometimes most people just want to know: did I pass or fail? Did I do good? Did I not do good? What's kind of your thoughts on it, and how did you find, when you were first doing assessments and consultations, and how have you developed that over time?
Well, I've got a lot of answers to this. Well, to answer your question about how important it is, I would say it's crucially important more because it's your first start of relationship building with the person. I mean, from a financial perspective, with you business wise as a trainer, you want to make sure that person starts to build some trust with you, and be honest with you, is slightly impressed. Thinks that you offer some value that others may not, and then wants to come back and is excited to start. So. People, this is where you get that sort of fine art of riding a line a little bit. People hate going to the doctor, and you don't want it to feel too clinical. I'm not saying you're trying to play mini physical therapist, but if you're doing lots of tests, lots of things, and especially when you're telling people start to feel like, what is this? Like, I came here to get, work on my arms a little bit, and now you're, and, but on the same token, they want to feel like you're doing a few little extra things that maybe others aren't.
Yeah.
So, it's just kind of that sort of the just right sort of situation, right? But you also want to make sure you're connecting this way. So the first thing I would say, I mean, yeah, you can have your neck down stuff that you feel is important for you to help find a safe and individualized training direction, right? That's all we're doing for an assessment, trying to find a safe and individualized training direction. But you want to make sure that while you're doing that, or during that same session, you not only get the info that you feel like you need, but you get a bead on what you think that person is going to be interested in, right? So maybe you're that person's an engineer, they're detail oriented. They might want to hear what you're looking at, right? And other ones might just be like, I don't know what you're talking about. What, you want me to do this? You know what I mean? And I'm just here to work out. I don't know. Well, that person's kind of telling you, look, you don't have to tell me all the things you're finding or whatever. So, and some of that, again, it's the human skill. And this also applies to where some people may, speaking of other trainers here, is where your personality may best fit, right? So maybe you're a super intelligent trainer, but you don't have the best bedside manner. You're not that funny. You're not that witty. You're semi-shy. You're kind of nerdy, right? And a lot of people are not going to want to train with you. You're going to struggle to get clients, right? But meanwhile, down the road, there's a client who you think there's a trainer who you think is a total idiot. but they are killing it. They got clients running in and out of their doors, and you're thinking, what the heck? It's because it's the personality aspect of it that people are coming for. So maybe you, as the slightly nerdy, more socially awkward person, maybe you're better as a strength coach at a college, or writing articles, or doing other things that are more in the background, because you just don't have the prerequisite personality traits for it. You know, so the perfect sort of blend is the prerequisite personality traits with the nerdy demeanor and mindset to try to learn as much as you possibly can, and to be able to give people the best medicine, but to make them enjoy taking it. Right.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
yeah, so you're covering the neck, you know what I mean? The neck up thing, and then you've got the neck down thing. So, and I would say that's the biggest thing I feel like it's not being taught, is everything is leaning more towards academic and more towards technical powerlifting. It's just like, you're training a person, man. And whereas older trainers and coaches, where a lot of us, you know, especially younger ones, think they might not be as smart because they're not as up on the research, or they say things like, well, science is, and, you know, trainers are ahead of research, and all those typical arguments. But what they're 1,000 times better at is the human side of things, because that's what they had to go on. And they can teach a lot of younger trainers about that. So, you know, when you say the pendulum is swung, to me, it's swung too far the other side, where even me on the science side, like, I pull away from some of that stuff, because I look at some of these people and I just go, you're smart, but you would, in a week, I'd be firing you if you worked for me as a trainer. All my clients would hate you.
Yeah, it's one of those things of, you know, you said there a couple of times, you know, adding value, building relationship, making sure that they're, you know, enjoying the sessions. And it's interesting that you touched on there, you know, someone who might be a little bit quieter, but then someone who's going to be, you know, a little bit louder. In terms of that, striking that balance a little bit, is it just a case of, you know, look, go up and speak to a lot more, build up that skill set? Because I think that is one of the, you know, you mentioned it there, you've got the knowledge of how to program, teach deadlift, teach squat, and all those sort of things. Whereas, you know, coaching is an art. You know, there's a knack to being able to build a relationship with somebody and get them to enjoy it. Is it just a case of, you know, the need to take that step in terms of speaking to more people and developing that experience? Like, it's not going to happen necessarily overnight.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, roll with me here for a little bit. We're in like the dating app realm, right? I promise you're a single guy, because it tends to be more guys, because females can have any, you know, or easily meet guys, right? And you will meet, if you're a single guy and you have no problem with talking to girls on the street. I don't mean being a creep. I just mean just being normal conversation. You run into people. You will meet way more interesting prospects and interesting girls that you'll go out with if you've got a little bit of game than on those stupid apps, because people don't value those apps as much. Why? Because there's 1,000 other guys that are liking them as well. And it just gets to be, getting clients is the same way. People get on their social media, and then there's the ad for this gym and this gym and this gym and this gym. And everybody is basically telling them, come here. You know what I mean? They're the belle of the ball, right? Everybody's telling them the same thing. But if they meet you at the coffee shop and they start being, oh, that guy's kind of cool, right? Boom, you are already ahead, because they've got a little bit of rapport with you. So again, it goes back to stop relying. So you want to get clients, stop relying so much on all this web stuff, right? Yes, it's important to have social media, because that allows people to get to know you a little bit, because they can follow you and hear your thoughts and whatever. That is actually relationship building. But if you're running a gym, get out there, pound the pavement. And I don't mean putting flyers on people's doors. I mean, talk to everyone. Look presentable, talk to everyone. Don't make it overly overt. Don't right off the bat put yourself in, you know, you're the trainer or whatever. If you look fit, you know what I mean? I'm not a bodybuilder. I've always had wide shoulders, good arms, and I get compliments on that all the time, right? So that's all. Sometimes it's a star. Oh, you look pretty fit. Yeah, I'm sure. trainer down the road, blah, 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 blah. That's how we're all keep it organic. And that's where you get your best clients. So again, it's a generational thing. When you were 30 years ago, you were an independent trainer, you had to do that.
Yeah. Just going on that, because I know obviously, we've touched on a couple of things there of, being that skill set, building up that rapport. And you always say to clients, don't compare yourself to other people. They're on a different journey, a different path. They're a little bit further down in terms of their progression. Do you think that's, sometimes what holds coaches and trainers back, and sometimes actually puts people off, being like, oh, how am I ever going to get to that point where, people are doing courses and books or have X amount of clients? Is it just a case of actually it's not that the end of the world to, look at what they're doing and think, do you know what, actually, they must be doing something right, because they're heading in that right direction. Similar to what you mentioned about, maybe a quieter coach thinking, oh, well, he's really loud but he's got loads of clients, rather than, just brushing that aside and be like, no, people should come work with me because I know all the science, rather than, taking little bits from other places to progress forward a little bit.
Winners think about winning, losers think about winners. Right? So here's loser mentality is looking at the success CrossFit had. CrossFit is no longer the hot thing, but they're not starving, right? But and went like and looked at all the negatives about it, right? Meanwhile, CrossFit was handing everybody their ass, right? I'm talking about making money hand over fist. Yes, it's coach specific, we can get into all that, but I'm just talking about the in general thing. It was attracting a lot of people. It was getting shoe branding, clothes branding. I mean, it was killing it. So versus looking and go, okay, I might not agree with their programming, but why is this so attractive to people? Meanwhile, I'm over here struggling to get clients. So the loser mentality is, well, all those people are just so dumb. They're just sheep. They don't know how to do this. Like, that's not making you an attractive person. Who wants to be around the person who complains all the time? Yeah. Now you get on social media and all you do is crap on CrossFit. Well, why would I train with you now? I don't know any better, and you just seem negative. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So I know CrossFit's an easy example, but we're all still doing that now in different ways. So you may not like the game, but you're going to play it. And if you're going to play it, you got to play to win. What do people want? Right? So then how do I meld that with what I find valuable and interesting? Right? And then when I say compromise, that's what I mean. And all it means is this is the real world. Now, here's what's in my own little selfish brain. And instead of bitching about why everybody is not more like me, which is the most narcissistic thing you could think of, well, what's the market calling for? And now what can I fill in? So do I have to make a little bit of compromises here to make it a little more appealing? Yes, but it's better than what I think the alternative is. And if nobody's coming to it, then you're not helping. You're not moving things forward. In the real world, things move forward like that. We normally just want to go boom, change it, but then we lose all the things. Back to that analogy with the NFL. You thought you gained one thing, but your solution wasn't a solution because it created a much bigger problem.
Absolutely. Do you think, because there's that phrase, isn't there, given what they want, but also what they need? Do you think that's the blend, of that, there's so many things, lots of coaches, I know I've got my own thoughts on, well, I maybe wouldn't do it that way, I maybe wouldn't do it that. But when you're having clients coming in, you're building that trust, building that relationship. Obviously, they're going to have preconceived ideas when you're coming in, and give them a little bit of what they want, a little bit like what you mentioned. Well, I just want to come in here and do bicep curls, but then also have a sprinkling in there of what they need from the assessment, from what you've spoken about, from the food diary that they've put down.
Sure. And what you have to do is that takes some thought. It's it's at this point where a lot of trainers start thinking, so I'm just supposed to randomly put together workouts and not care. And no, that's a straw man, right? but there are ways to incorporate some varieties and some interest while keeping people consistent on other things. Why don't you have one or two lifts that you do consistent and you give them variety and other things? That's just a random example, right? So with some thought, you can have a system that you understand is repeatable and consistent and fits with principles. That's your medicine, but it's delivered in a way that the person goes, oh, give me that medicine, I'll take that, right? And is excited about it. So that's the problem. Like I said, it's always that, well, I'm not doing that. That's bull crap. You know what I mean? That's just varied. You know what I mean? That's just random. Okay. Varied with a certain system and random are not the same thing, right? This is what was going through my head. Okay. People like this variety stuff, but I don't like this random stuff. And I look at some of these workouts and there's not really good balance. There's no rotation. There's a lot of this movement and neglects of this movement. So, okay, how can I fill in these pieces, but still keep it interesting for people? What's the aspect they like, the aspects they like? See, that's what you got to do. You got to keep those in. And your solution also has to have those, but improve one element. Normally we go, well, they got to be consistent and they got to do this. But yeah, now it's boring and monotonous. And you're asking people to chase goals that aren't their goals. And then you wonder why after a few weeks or a few months, they all go to the place that you hate.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. The sort of we've kind of fluctuated between the, where do people go wrong? What's kind of the best practices or tips, that you've learned to be able to, get clients, keep clients, and build that. We've mentioned it a couple of times throughout this chat of, building trust and not having that thing of, all right, well, listen to what I'm saying. One of the key things, from the more senior coaches that I've worked with, and you saying it there as well, listen. Because sometimes you're going to get the answers that you're looking for from clients.
Oh, always, all the answers, all the answers are right in front of you. That's your client. It's understanding how to meld what you know is important with what they want. That's what I mean by compromise. I don't mean compromise your values. That's the issue that people don't quite get. And so this is what I mean by there's too much of the sort of academic mindset. All it's going to do in the real world is just push people more into the things that they're interested in, because it's more fun, it's less technical, it's more relatable, right? So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So even though the people who have the knowledge who they'd be better off training with are doing everything that they can to push people away because they sound negative, they're complaining about this, they make things too technical, not relatable. Because people go, well, that's not for me. It's not what I'm interested in, because they're not understanding the people side. So this is why I say this. I say the big problem comes down to this. We take too many things from the classroom and the textbook and try to translate it to the gym floor. What I did when I started teaching was 100% flip. I took everything that was happening on the gym floor and I took it to the classroom and I took it to the books. And if you look, this is one of the things I'm most proud to say. If you look at a lot of things people will say about my work is they'll say, it's so refreshing. It makes so much, it's so relatable. I can use this, right? So it's not about, oh, Nick seems really smart or, all this technical stuff. No, it's because I'm saying, I know what's happening with real people. I'm listening to that, I'm addressing that, and I'm showing you ways to make it, to be better prepared, to make it more predictable and repeatable. Because that's what, I'm not saying what I do is science, I mean real science, but the power of science is its predictive nature, right? Can I look at some things like look at astronomy, right? And or maybe it's a different aspect of looking at space, where they can predict where to land a satellite 10 years from now, and hundreds of millions of miles or whatever that away. Predictive nature. Now that's a hard science, right? But I can predict pretty well, based on a few things, what this person may stick with, or I could have predicted what happened in that football team's setting. I could have told you that was going to happen, right? So there you go. And then from there, that's where you start to address what's really happening. What are people really going to do? What are they going to want? And just get it a little bit better than where we are and build off of that.
Yeah.
That's
you've You've kind of preempted the last question that I was going to ask there. I think it was a nice sum up in terms of the topics that we've chatted about there. But the last question that I always like to ask is, from everything that we've chatted about there, what would be your take home points or words of wisdom, if you've got any more from what you've just mentioned there?
Well, I would say, I mean, you got to, if I'll say this, if it don't make dollars, it don't make sense.
Yeah, I think that, I know we speak about a lot of things, but ultimately, if you're gonna build relationships, get people to trust you, and keep clients with you, you're gonna because at the end of the day, even though we said it right at the start, we get involved in training and coaching because we enjoy it. Sometimes people aren't going to enjoy it as much, but ultimately, you've still got to be able to make money and make a business out of it. Thanks a lot for taking the time to jump on, Nick. A couple of tangents, loads of topics covered in there. But for anyone listening who might want to see the content you put out there, the books that you put out there, or have got any questions about what we've chatted about today, where can people find you or reach out to you?
Just my website, nicktumminello.com or strengthzonetraining.com. If you want to get the NT loops, it's my initials, ntloop.com.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Nick, for taking the time to jump on. Thanks a lot to everyone listening, and I will see you all next week.